I believe Xi Jinping's master plan for China is to let huge chunks of the population die. He's emulating the United States. It's very clear that he's modeling the future of the Chinese industry off of the 1960s, 1970s era of the United States. So we've come 6 conversations now into this new channel. How are you feeling?
Feeling pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I like this time with you.
I actually really like this time too. I would have never guessed that doing a podcast together would somehow be like quality relationship time.
Yeah, it's connecting time. We actually don't have children interrupting us every 5 minutes during these 45 minutes that we talk.
Well, it's more than that too. Like, I get it. That
Maybe for you.
I will never understand the mom complaints about kids. The mom plaints.
The mom.
Mom plaints about children. They're like universal.
Yeah.
Moms everywhere in all languages all like make snarky comedic jokes about motherhood. Like dads, we're like, we don't really want to complain about our kids. But moms are like, psh, I pushed him out of my vagina. I'm going to make fun of him all day.
I'm not trying to make fun of them. I'm definitely airing my grievances though.
Yeah.
Because you can't really air your grievances to your children, right? They don't understand. It's not appropriate anyways.
They don't listen.
They don't listen. They don't really care. They don't get it.
There's no,
right?
Yeah, they're not going to give you any love.
I make these little mental notes that I'm like, when she's 30, I'm going to bring this back up.
But in all seriousness, I agree. This has turned into some really quality time for us because we used to have smart conversations all the time.
Yeah.
We used to talk about world events and spy operations and places we wanted to travel and life. What did you called them? Dreams and...
Hopes and dreams.
Hopes and dreams. You've
Hopes
always
and
called
dreams
them.
conversations.
We used to talk about that.
Yeah.
Then we started talking about diapers and now we talk about dinner plans.
I know.
What's the dinner? And I don't mean dinner plans like a date night dinner.
Nothing exciting. It's literally like, what will the kids eat? What's in the fridge? What are we going to eat?
Yeah. And it turns into this kind of cycle of life. But you're introverted.
Yeah.
And you've always kind of struggled with anxiety. And now you used to be a covert CIA officer.
Yeah.
Now you're in front of a camera. You're in front of multiple cameras, behind a mic, live on YouTube, talking about how you make fun of your kids.
Yeah, I just don't think about what's out there. I think about you sitting in front of me. Yeah.
And that's the trick?
And that's the trick.
I guess that's a pretty good trick. So you've also we've joked on camera and off camera about how you have a filter. Can you talk about what your filter is?
So my formative years were in Japan, a very polite society. And then even when we moved back to the United States, we practice a Japanese sect of Buddhism is what we follow. So the Japanese culture is very ingrained in my family. So we all have always had a filter on what we say because it's important to be polite. It's important to, I would say be thoughtful, but really it's seem thoughtful. And so I just have created this very strong filter over the last 40 years that, I always think before I say something. And then even then, it's not just giving myself space so I don't blurt out something I'll regret. There's another filter beyond that where I'm like, oh, this is what I really want to say, but this is what I'm going to say because I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to be rude. I want them to save face, right? So
it's interesting because you talk about a filter, but what you're really talking about is it's a lie.
I know you like to call it that.
That's what it is. Like when you have a thought, and then you think to yourself, I can't say that thought. Instead, I must say this other thought. Then you're lying about what you're actually thinking. And I love that this came from Japan. I love that you're introducing this as like your filter from Japanese society, because the Japanese absolutely have a reputation of being polite and proper and organized. They're a bunch of biased, lying assholes sometimes, and it's true. They're racist Only Japanese people count in the eyes of Japanese, right? Everybody else is a second-class citizen. And that's why they're running into their own issues in their country, right? That's why they have a declining population and they don't allow immigration. And you have to jump through 12 bureaucratic hoops if you're going to get Japanese residency.
Yeah.
It's like the polar opposite of the United States, which is hilarious considering how close we are as allies, right? Yeah. Everybody looks at them and thinks they're a democracy and they're this and they're that and they're a first world like leader. They actually are racist. It's codified in law, their racism, right? And it's just amazing to me. So, and you're right, they have this veil of propriety, but they drink all night, they smoke all the time, they're sexual freaks.
They have a high suicide rate.
They have a high suicide rate because the pressure that's on every Japanese adolescent to exceed the expectation of their parents is so high that they just... Death is easier for a lot of them, right? You can see how that culture begot samurais and how that culture begot kamikaze pilots. You can see it in like their legacy. That said, I still love Japan. Yeah. Amazing place. Fantastic people to be around. As long as you accept that whoever's looking at you is lying to you. What's your dad call it?
Oh, the grin fuck. Yeah.
Explain to us the Joel Bustamante description of the Japanese grin fuck.
No, he actually applies that term to Chinese because the Japanese aren't the only culture where it's important to save face, right? There are multiple cultures in the world where it's important to save face. You don't want to say something that's going to embarrass somebody or embarrass you. And so you say something else with a smile. And so my dad calls it the grin fuck, where like as they are stabbing you in the back doing something, they're smiling and nodding in your face and you know, placating you. So I do think it's interesting that there, you know, these cultures out there. I still have to say I prefer the cultures that lie to my face. I would rather have you be polite than
lie, right?
Because there's an understanding that they are being polite. You know, like if you understand the culture, you know that they are being polite. So you just have to figure out how to navigate those things. I would much rather have that than have somebody be just straight up rude to my face. Because I think the problem, you know, I'm reading all these Star Trek books now, and it's not like we're not like Vulcans who say what we mean in a logical manner. And so it makes sense, right? Like I'm being honest with you and it doesn't hurt your feelings because it's the logical thing to say and do.
And you are a logical driven person too.
Right.
Right? You're Vulcan
right.
to Vulcan.
You're Vulcan to Vulcan, right? You're so like my logic, your logic, they meet. Nobody gets upset. That's not how it works in the human world, right? Humans, when they say something, there's usually an emotion behind it. So if somebody says something rude to you, there's usually some kind of nasty emotion behind it as well that's being emanated, right? That energy is being pushed towards you. At least if somebody is polite to me, I don't have to deal with all that negative energy. As an introvert, it's really like powerful, the energy that people send to you. So, you know, I would rather be in a society where I have to try to read between the lines and very diplomatically try to get to understand what that person is really saying.
That sounds like a painful society. How much energy is wasted? Seriously, yeah. If I got to put a vote in the Vulcan court, then I'm putting a vote in the Vulcan court right now. Because it's interesting. We're talking introvert, extrovert. Because I lean on the extrovert side. I certainly have introvert tendencies. You also have extrovert tendencies. Yeah. But my point is just, if someone's going to lie to my face, it's so awkward because you can see them lying to your face.
Yeah.
And you know that they don't, like, I mean, like a Japanese person who's giving you the last piece of food, giving you their whole plate of food. And they're like, I want you to have this. You're like, you don't want me to have that. Right. Like, this is your culture, your society, your social pressure, your norms. It's a beautiful thing, but just you actually want to eat this, so you eat it. So then you push it back to them, and then they push it back to you, and then you push it back to them, and then you. Oh my god! You
find that exhausting, huh?
There's nothing beautiful about that. It's just two people not eating. What's the point of that, right? What's the point of that?
Better than somebody being like, Sorry about your luck. There's nothing left. I'm
pretty sure that's exactly what
it could, because then maybe eventually you'll get to like, why don't we split the meal? And then you both get to eat.
Is that the goal? So why don't we just start with that?
That's a good question. Because society isn't quite there yet. That's the middle ground we're trying to get to.
And it's really interesting too, because you come from a Venezuelan family.
Mm-hmm.
So your Venezuelan father
Yeah.
married an American woman,
Mm-hmm.
and then they together immigrated with you to Japan,
Yeah.
where they then all voluntarily adopted this Japanese culture.
Yeah.
And like I said, I love so many elements about Japanese culture.
Yeah.
The thing that I don't love is when we bring back a part of that culture that doesn't fit in our culture. And inside American culture, the filter, it just doesn't work very well. Because Americans don't like filters. We don't understand them. We don't appreciate them. Not like the Japanese do. It's not Vulcan to Vulcan here.
Right. And I think that's the key is it's not understood. So an American will take you at face value for what you're saying. They'll never come to the conclusion that you are saying something you don't mean, and that they should guess that and alter their actions based on what you just said, right? They'll just be like, "Oh, you don't want to come to the party? No problem.
Yeah.
We'll see you later."
Like, no, I do want to come to the party. I just can't say that in front of my friend.
Yeah.
No, I agree. We don't understand filters. You even say that you don't understand nuance.
It's difficult.
It's gotten us it's gotten me in so much trouble in our relationship that you don't understand nuance.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I don't think I use very much nuance. I'm pretty straightforward, but I still do find that there's an American culture for nuance. That's true. And that's probably our legalistic background. We're like, oh, you can't hold me accountable for, I said late, but what I meant was just not on time.
Oh, yeah. It's like when you see laws written with really broad language and you're like, what does that even mean? Like, I can be arrested for...
Yeah. What exactly is possession?
Yeah.
Is possession I'm holding it, or it's within proximity of me, or it's on my property? Like, what exactly is possession?
Or there was a case recently, an injunction place, I think it was Kentucky, someplace in America, where they were passing a law to be able to criminally charge librarians for having harmful books in the children's section. What is a harmful book?
Wow.
Who is the judge, right? That's very subjective.
Yeah.
So, we definitely do in an American culture. It's different. And I don't know, maybe it's not, I don't know that I would say it's cultural the way that it is in like East Asian cultures.
Only because we're so young. I mean, it's cultural here, but we don't have anywhere near the legacy that you see coming out of East Asia. I mean, China's been around 5,000 years. Japan's been around as long at least.
Yeah.
So we've got 270 years of experience, I think, here in the United States.
I do forget we're so young.
We're so young. I remember when you and I, we took a trip to, were we in Kyoto or were we in Tokyo? Where they showed us that farmhouse that was powered by water. It was a grind house. It was grinding cornmeal or something.
That was at the base of Mount Fuji. There's a village there.
And the lady that was with us, we both, I think I looked at her. It was mind-boggling to me. I think I looked at it and I was like, wow, what a beautiful old house. And she looked at us and she was like, yeah, that's older than the United States.
Yeah, 400 years old.
And I was like...
Just the house, yeah.
What?
Yeah. Mind-blowing.
It gives you a sense of how young our culture really is. Now... just across the water, just across the ocean, I guess it's still considered an ocean that spans between Japan and China.
The sea.
The sea. Just across the sea is China. And China has so many similar cultural traits, right? The grin fuck, like you said. Even though if you've been to that area of the world, like China, Japan, South Korea, there's like... animosity between those three countries that are all very close. But their cultures are in many ways very similar. But talk about a place that's running into some real like generational issues. They've been around for a long time. They know how to sort themselves out in a lot of ways, but now they're running into some challenges, and we've been really reading about it in headlines recently.
Yeah.
I mean, fertility challenges, population challenges, employment challenges, real estate challenges, and I can't help but feel like they're all like tied together, right? And from my experience as a married entrepreneur with children who graduated college, I mean, you and I started our life together comparatively late. We married at 30, started dating at 27. My mom was in her second marriage by the time she was 25.
Yeah, done having kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's wild to think that we started our first marriage 5 years after my mom started her second marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. We met when I was 27 when I met you, and my mom had already been married for several years and had me when she was 27.
So now China as a country that's kind of modernizing. Now, granted, the China that we talk about really only started in 1949.
Yes, which I think is really interesting talking about a young country. The Chinese culture and the Chinese people are ancient, but the Chinese Communist Party is very new, and it is also an experiment.
Yeah,
right?
that's
And it's
true.
been fascinating to watch this experiment unfold, to watch their child policy change over the years as they try to adjust for the consequences, basically, of how they manage their people. Right.
I mean, they had the Cultural Revolution where they wiped out the huge parts of their own culture.
Yeah.
And then they had the one-child policy where they just intentionally stunted birth rates.
Yeah. Having the side effect of people choosing male children over female children more often, which, whether that was anticipated or not,
created a dearth of females.
Or dearth of males, right? So more dearth...
An absence of.
An absence of. Thank you. I don't have my dictionary.
You're the reader
today.
too. Come on. I know like 4 fancy words.
Well,
that's one of them.
That's one of them that I don't know. Thanks for clarifying. But yeah, so they ended up with more males than females, and now they're in this quandary of, that adds to people marrying later, people choosing to have less children, people choosing career over, and then if it's important racially for them to marry within the Chinese marrying Chinese, if that's important to them.
Status.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's true too, within the same ethnic culture.
Right, because in theory, that type of mismatch between how many eligible males and females there are wouldn't matter so much if it didn't matter who you married. But because there are probably plenty of females in the world, but if it matters for that you're marrying a Chinese female, that's a big deal.
Yeah, what's really interesting too is they have it's causing compounding challenges because you've got, like you were saying, you've got an absence of females, an abundance of males who are in their core earning years, right? 28 to 35, right? And they all pushed off marriage. So now you've got an older population, older than what they're used to, right? 32-year-olds that don't have many female options to marry if you're going to have a marital union that creates offspring.
Right.
And you've got career on top of it in the middle of like an unemployment crisis.
Right.
In a culture that has no problem abusing its workforce because it doesn't have the social laws that we have here in the United States. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So in China, there's high unemployment, but the way that the employers have been treating that is to treat their employees as if there's high unemployment, you're lucky to have a job. And so now they make them work this 996, where it's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And these people who are working these 996 schedules, they have no time and no energy to date or try to find a spouse, even if they wanted to. And so all of the courtships are being pushed to later in life. Also in Chinese culture, it's important for a man to have some kind of investment to own a house, own a car. The housing market's been really tight in China, so it's difficult to do those things on top of that.
Yeah.
And then if you have these, and then the Chinese laws right now are that even though they've been expanding their child policy, so now they're trying to encourage people, you're welcome to have up to 3 kids.
You're welcome. You're welcome to have up to 3 kids.
Nobody's
crazy.
taking them up on the offer because everybody's working too hard. The women have a lot of men to choose from, and they're kind of choosing their career first. And then the current Chinese laws make it so that IVF and egg freezing are only available to married women. So if you're a 27-year-old woman and you're like, you know what, I'm probably not going to get married for a while, and I'm probably going to be, not married, not having kids until my late 30s. You can't freeze your eggs, right? You have to wait until you're married. What if you don't get married until you're 38, right? By then, the point is moot, right? And so it's creating, this insecure future for the Chinese country, for China, because what will they do? Their population is aging. The birth rate is falling. The marriage rate is falling. What does that say for their future?
Yeah, what's funny is, to put it another way, it's a chain reaction.
Yeah.
People are getting married later. Because they're getting married later, they're not having large families because they're getting married later.
Yeah.
And as they choose to get married later and have smaller families later, it also means that the investment into cars and homes is also being pushed back until they have enough money to be able to afford a house or a home, or a house or a car. Yeah. But in order to afford a house or a car, they have to have a job. And the jobs are making them work this 12 or this 996, right? 9 days, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, which prevents them from even meeting a spouse, which prevents them from getting married, which prevents them from having kids.
Yeah.
And inside this construct, what you do have is aging generations still dying.
Yes.
And you have younger generations not being produced. So it's fascinating. It also makes me understand a little bit more why Xi Jinping is so focused on creating a tech hub in China, because it's just like Obama. If you remember Barack Obama in 2008 when he took the presidency here in the United States, do you remember what his big focus was?
I just remember the Asia pivot.
The Asia pivot was important because we were at CIA
because
during the Asia pivot.
That's what I was doing. I was pivoting.
But Barack Obama's platform was all about bringing high-tech production jobs back to the United States. Manufacturing jobs stay abroad. High-tech production should be in the United States. He wanted to make and continue to invest in the United States being a producer of high technology, because high-tech jobs are all high-dollar jobs. Those high-dollar jobs can be taken by fewer people. Fewer people create a larger impact on the economy, and everything goes on and on, right? Xi Jinping's been making this focus towards a high-tech sector in China, making them the tech exporter for at least the Eastern Hemisphere. In doing so, he would essentially make it so that they could handle a giant generational population bust, because they would need a fraction of the number of people they have right now, as long as they're educated and working in high-tech jobs.
So you think that Xi Jinping's focus actually is a part of that is planning for a smaller population?
Correct. I think he wants a smaller population. It's the same thing that we have here in the United States. And again, I'm going to speak very frankly and probably in a way that makes a lot of people upset. The number of productive adults in the United States is not many. There's a huge number of people out there that they're just pissing away their time and their money. They're not ambitious. They're not trying. They're not educated. They're living off of social welfare, right? They're having more children just so they can get more welfare. There are children without parents. There are homes that are lived in by squatters. Like, we live in a country where a huge portion of our country is held afloat by the social welfare programs that we have, which is why there's so much, just polarization in our country, because some people are like, I don't want my tax dollars to go to floating these people that don't do anything. But then hidden among this group of people who don't do anything are very legitimate people who just need a chance, right? But how do you...
It's hard to sift out the abusers.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've got these two populations. That doesn't exist in China, right? In China, people die on the street. It's like India. People just die on the street. And then like the trash people come and pick them up and get rid of them and do whatever. I'm not saying it happens in Beijing, but it happens all across the countryside. And the vast majority, there's no social welfare program in China. You get old, you live with your kids.
Yeah.
Right? You get sick, your kids pay for you. Or you die.
Which is an interesting part of the problem also, because all of the current generation, as their parents age, they are responsible for them. And you and I are already approaching an age where we have young children. And in the next, I would say 10 years, we'll be responsible for caring probably for, I mean, your mom is younger, but for caring for my parents. And now, you know, that impacts us financially, that impacts our career. So, you know, if you have people who are waiting to get married, right? And then suddenly their parents are aging at the same time. I mean, what kind of, you know, I want to say energy drag, but that's not the right word. I mean,
resource drain.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What kind of resource drain is that on your individuals? Then they're not going to be able to work 12-hour days for 6 days a week, trying to be caregivers for their parents and for their children. It's not possible. Yeah,
you know, a big part of it, if you think about the COVID response in the United States too, right? The COVID response in the United States was largely focused on, what were they called? Susceptible groups? What were they called? There was a term.
Oh, at risk?
Yeah, at-risk communities or at-risk individuals. So that was the big focus, was how do we take care of the diabetics and the elderly and the overweight? How do we take care of the smokers and the people who are high susceptibility risk?
Yeah.
That's not how it was everywhere else in the world, right? In the rest of the world, they were just kind of like, you get your vaccine because it's mandated by the government and you don't have a choice. And at-risk groups were kind of just rolled into the larger population, right? We handle things very, very differently here because we have this culture, if you will. I don't know what it is, an imperative. I have no idea where it comes from. But in the United States, we feel like we have to offset Darwinian evolution. We have to take care of the have-nots. We have to protect the people who are at risk, even though they got themselves at risk by having poor eating habits and having poor fitness habits and being smokers and whatever else. So it became this major challenge. And that's not how it is everywhere else. So yes, to be short, I believe Xi Jinping's master plan for China is to let huge chunks of the population die. Because as the population shrinks and they adopt more of a high-tech, low manufacturing, high innovation kind of foundation, he's emulating the United States. It's very clear that he's modeling the future of the Chinese industrial base off of the 1960s, 1970s era United States. And it's working, right?
Yeah.
What is Huawei? Their own telecommunications company.
Right.
Right? And it's worldwide.
Right.
You see that they have the top selling electric vehicle in the world right now. They beat out Tesla. I'm not saying they created it themselves. A lot of that's stolen IP, but they're the ones producing it. That means Chinese people are doing the work. Chinese people are bringing in the income. Chinese people are getting paid high-tech wages. When they absorb the semiconductor industry out of Taiwan, you can see that that's the direction they're going. It's a very smart long-term play for a country that has a long-term history, right? A long vision.
Yeah.
And it's not at all fair or democratic or any of the things that we value.
So a long-term vision of curating the population that he wants.
Which arguably is the same thing we're doing here in the United States, only we don't say it the same way, right? You're curating a population where people who have opportunities have children who get opportunities. That's how it works in the United States. If you're poor in the United States, you're more likely to have a history of poor offspring. Right? That's why the rags to riches story is such a powerful story in the United States, because it's not common.
Right.
It's rare. Usually it's rags to rags, riches to riches. So we have this idea that, you can just, if you work hard enough, you can just pick yourself up from your bootstraps and you can make it work. And to a certain extent, yes, you can. It's a shit ton of work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of luck that goes into it and connections.
Yeah.
But essentially, you're stuck in the rut that you're in unless you buck that rut nonstop.
Yeah.
I basically just said that China's cultivating its society by letting people die. We're cultivating our society financially. So I feel maybe I've gone a little bit on the deep end here. Sharing my true feelings because I don't have a filter.
You have no filter.
I used to have a filter.
I should have like an uncomfortable meter in front of me that's like, it'll correspond with my filter meter. That's like more uncomfortable, higher filter.
This is what you live with.
Yeah.
I see why you don't go out in public. I do. I understand it more and more.
That's why when we go to parties, I'm on the other side of the room. You're like, babe, come hold my hand. Okay. Let me get some snacks first.
So despite the fact that we have these experiences, you know, kind of seeing the dirty way that the world works, we still want to travel the world.
Yeah.
And we still want to show our children the world.
Yeah.
How do you justify those two thoughts going together?
I want to understand other cultures. So I would consider myself mostly American culturally. But when I was a kid, I was definitely one of those third culture kids where I wasn't really American. I wasn't really Japanese. I wasn't really Venezuelan. And I was trying to find where I fit in. But during those years, it just occurred to me that nobody's right. No culture is perfect. Yeah. Nobody's right. Nobody has the perfect government. And so I love learning about other cultures and why they tick the way that they tick, why their government's set up the way that it's set up. I love learning about their history and their language and their food because it all ties in to the way that they live their lives and the way that they interact with others and the way that, you know, we can kind of estimate our future as a planet, as a human race is going to go. So that's what I love about traveling is I want to understand from more than just the American perspective why things work the way they work. And maybe one day it just seems to me that a mix of what already exists will get us closer to the right answers.
So do you feel like you are getting... Do you feel like your travel experience, do you feel like your life experience at CIA and beyond has helped make you more optimistic about the human race? Does the face tell it all on that one?
No, I'm not more optimistic.
Because I certainly feel like I've become very practical.
Yeah.
In large part because the world outside of our borders is a very practical world. Survival isn't guaranteed. Meal to meal isn't guaranteed. And I'm not just talking about like your poverty-stricken places in Central America or, you know, Central Africa. I mean, like, there are lots of places in the world where people are just trying to make it, or they're making it, but they're making it on like 2 ounces of meat and 8 ounces of rice.
Yeah.
They're not making it like we have it here on a 16-ounce steak and we throw 3/4 of it away, right? They don't, it's not like that. So it's really fascinating to me because as I see the pragmatism, the survivalism, the cold matter-of-fact way that business is handled abroad, it makes me feel like the world is much colder and much scarier than what we think it is.
So I still have hope, and I cling to that.
Because you have a filter.
Because
you don't tell people the truth.
It's beyond my filter. No, I have hope because I know. So have you seen the movie Legend? It's an old movie with Tom Cruise, like 1980 something. And at the very end of it, you know, it's the whole movie is this, you know, fight between good and evil. And at the end, the person who's evil says, you know, what is light without dark? And it's so powerful to me because I feel like every human being has the capacity for light and for dark. So we have the capacity to be good to each other. We have the capacity to share resources. We have the capacity to not hurt others, right?
But we have the imperative to do the opposite.
What do you mean by that?
Because the survival, if you are the nice person, if you are the one that shares everything, if you are the kind, generous, like we have the option, we have the capacity, if that person is you, you will be systematically abused.
In current day. So I think we talked about this before.
Do you think it was better in like the Dark Ages?
No, I think we've talked about this before where like the idea of communism always seemed like such a great idea until I realized like humans have to run it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, that's never going to work because
humans are humans.
Humans are humans. Nothing will ever be equal. So in theory, we have the capacity to practice, equity to make sure that everybody works hard and everybody shares their resources and everybody treats each other kindly. We could do it if we wanted to. But the problem is that we don't. We feel threatened, we feel insecure, and those feelings lead us to protect our own.
Yeah.
Right?
What CIA taught us about this. This was like the key to understanding how to turn an asset, how to turn a patriot into a traitor. Was just understanding that, what you just said, that they have the capacity to be equitable and honest and fair, but they're going to choose self-preservation.
Yeah.
Right? How do you describe that process?
So I think that for somebody not to choose self-preservation, they have to trust. It's like the prisoner's dilemma. You have to trust that somebody else is going to do the right thing too. But none of us have that level of trust. And so in the end, you have to look out for yourself and your family and those who are important to you, right?
What is the prisoner's dilemma? Do you remember it?
It's, it's going to take me a long time to explain it. So it's, you have two people, they're both prisoners, and I believe if one rats the other one out, but
there's
the other one stays silent.
Score.
Yeah, there's this mathematical score where you are. It is better for you, kind of, to rat the other person out,
right? Because
you go scot-free and the other person gets jail time. If you both stay silent, you both get jail time. If you both rat each other out, I can't remember if that
it's like the massive cost. It's the worst scenario.
It's the worst scenario. So you're counting that the other person is on the other person being honest, but you're not going to be honest.
And that's the prisoner's dilemma.
Yeah.
And that's the mathematical truth of it, is that mathematically, the empirical evidence shows that the predominant outcome is that one person rats out the other person while the other person rats out the first person. They both rat each other out because they can't count on the other person keeping quiet. Even though they do the math in their own head and they're like, oh, if I keep my mouth shut, the longest I'll go to jail is 2 years. But if I tell on the other person, right? If I rat out my other prisoner, then I have the chance of going scot-free or staying for 7 years.
Yeah.
And even with all the odds, people still
rat each other out.
Because there's no, and when it comes to it, there's no honor among thieves.
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like math, algebra has shown us people are not going to do the fair and equitable thing. Experience has shown us people are not going to do the fair and equitable thing. History has shown us people are not going to do the fair and equitable thing. And yet we keep wondering, we keep hoping, we keep thinking that someday, somehow, people will do the fair and equitable thing.
You have to have hope.
But we don't do it ourselves.
If the possibility exists, you have to have hope.
But that's what's so interesting is people have hope, but they don't practice it themselves.
Yeah.
Some of the oh my gosh, some of the people that I know who preach about fairness and equity and whatever, right? Woke culture, the list goes on, right? Environmentalism.
I love how you say it.
There's so many people who preach these
Tell me how you
things,
feel about it.
and then behind closed doors, they're wasteful, they're biased. Like, it's insane. The hypocrisy is insane. It is the prisoner's dilemma in action, right? We sit here and we blame our politicians for not policing a certain set of social norms that we don't even practice ourselves behind closed doors, right? And then we wonder why progress isn't made. Meanwhile, outside of the United States, the same thing is happening, only nobody's expecting politicians to police it. They're taking this much more pragmatic approach. This is one of the things that I love about Europe that people just don't talk about. There's universal healthcare in Europe, right? If you get sick in Italy, doctors are paid for, right?
Yeah.
Until, you know where I'm going with this?
Go ahead.
You know where I'm going. Until you're too sick. What happens when you're too sick? You don't want to say it. You don't want to admit it.
You get treated, obviously. It's universal health care.
This is your filter. Your filter is, the filter is strong in this one. Once you are too sick, a panel of European doctors decide whether or not it's more costly to treat your illness or whether you should just be written off, which is also why health insurance exists in Europe, so that you can become terminally ill. And when the public healthcare sector decides that they're not going to keep funding you because you're a terminal case, you're a waste of tax dollars. You will not have a return on investment. They're going to take the money that would go into treating your terminal illness and they're going to spread it out to treat society. But if you have health insurance, then you can use your own health insurance to treat your terminal illness. How is that actually better than what we have in the United States? How in the world is it better to have the state decide whether you live or die than to have your own choice whether you pay for insurance? This is one of those things that just people don't talk about. And we've seen it firsthand. And it's frustrating to me. And in Europe, they just accept it. And they accept it because their whole life they've been raised to know, like, oh, well, if I get cancer, I'm going to die. And I'm going to die relatively quickly because the state won't take care of me, because once I'm deemed at a high risk, low reward, then my access to healthcare dries up.
I think that's a separate conversation as well about the cultural norms regarding how we view life.
I don't disagree with you.
Because in America, so once you enter the hospital system in America, their job is to keep you alive.
By law.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
Which doesn't mean that you should be kept alive.
Whoa, the filter comes off.
I'm just saying, if you have
Let them die, she says.
No, if you...
I believe in the fair and the fair and equitable nature of human beings, but some people should not be kept alive.
I think there's a larger conversation to be had about how people view death. We, in modern society, are mostly removed from death.
Yeah.
Most people don't experience
society,
it in Western society, right? But the fact is that people age, people get sick, people die. And there's a certain point where, if you have a finite number of resources and you need to treat somebody who will survive, or you can use that to treat somebody who is terminal, right? Why put the resources into the person to extend their life that it's questionable whether the quality of life is going to be there for them, even if you do extend their life, right? So I think that's a completely separate conversation about, how the why there, right? In America, you have insurance. You can choose how long you want them to keep you alive.
All I'm saying is that there's a pragmatism that exists outside of our American borders. And you just hinted on it, right?
Yeah.
And you hinted on it because in your worldview and your experience, you've brought that with you. That said, if I was terminal, you would keep me alive. Maybe? Maybe not? Oh, man. I thought that was going to land. I thought that was going to score.
It didn't go the way you thought it was going to go.
So in the best interest of keeping up with me falling flat on my face, Our question from the SpyTribe today is a good one. I think you'll like it. And the question was Everyday Spy the first business idea we had, and was it always a success?
No. I think, so it wasn't the first business idea we had. I do think that it's been, I mean, in my eyes, it's been a success because it has grown steadily through your efforts, right? Through our efforts. So in my mind, that's a success because it continues to grow, and that's really exciting. But it was definitely not the first idea. The first few ideas, we had a business where we sold the emesis bags, the Trust Emma.
Yep.
So for anybody who doesn't know, emesis bags are the bags the hospitals give you to throw up into. They're very nice.
Our bag design was superior, but it was still just a barf bag.
Yeah, it was a purple barf bag. It was very nice.
I think we put $7,000 into that business. I think we were $7,000 into that business before, and I don't know that we ever broke even. I think we made we made maybe $700 back.
Yeah, that was
a net loss.
But that built a lot of online selling experience, and we had a couple of booths at some events, and then that made me realize how difficult having your own booth is selling something. And I thought it just gave me so much respect for vendors who have booths at events.
I started a bounce house business.
Yeah, that was my favorite one. Not at all.
That totally didn't work. Oh
no,
my gosh.
It didn't.
I think, the good news was we didn't get too deep into that financially.
Well, that's because I think that was the only one that I put the kibosh on.
Fast.
That was very fast. You brought it home, we tried it once, and I told you there's no way we're working every weekend with parents.
And
we're parents ourselves, but
risk.
High insurance risk, but I don't want to work with parents in that capacity.
Yeah.
On my weekends.
On their special days.
On their special days, yeah. If stuff goes wrong, no. No thanks.
And then we finally got into a consultancy.
Yeah.
We opened a consultancy.
Yeah, and that went well.
And our consultancy worked, and we learned very quickly the value of sharing information. People have their own relationship with information, which we knew from our time at CIA, but we had never seen it in a business context.
Yeah.
So the exact same presentation to 3 different people is interpreted 3 different ways. And then the 3 different ways, they all apply it to their situation in their own way as well. And then there's an ownership fact, like an ownership level where they take ownership over their own actions. And then there's an ongoing relationship because they value your information and you feel valued by them. It's the exact opposite of a bounce house.
Yeah.
Where like you're a service provider, they don't value you, and if you screw anything up, like you're an idiot, and if everything goes well for their party, then you're just one more thing that went well.
Yeah.
It's a completely different kind of beast.
Yeah. And Everyday Spy was born because you were trying these other businesses, and I was like, people are interested in you. Like, why don't you just do something where you answer people's questions or give them information that that I hear people asking you for? And you started a lecture series, an 8-part lecture series, put it together almost on the fly, just with ideas that you had already had, and it was really successful. And
it was not for profit either.
Yeah,
that first lecture series was all it was all not for profit for a local art studio, and that's how it took off.
Yeah,
and then I think from the time that Everyday Spy started, it's been largely successful, like you said.
Yeah.
We've had, and it's not been because of us, it's been because of all the failures before that. we learned a lot. And then when the right people discovered our little lecture series, we all of a sudden had a network, and we had kind of a brain trust that we could turn to with for ideas and for guidance and for mentorship.
Yeah, I agree. I think that having a group of people where you can bounce ideas off of people who is so valuable, that you can, lean on their experience for advice. It's so valuable.
And I think that's what I've come to really appreciate about this time with you too. You've always been the person that I bounce my ideas off of. Yeah. You've always been the person that I go to with my crazy, harsh commentary, and you take the edge off it.
Yeah.
And then you tell me that you wouldn't survive, you wouldn't save me if I was terminally ill.
Yeah, it's case by case basis. I need more facts here.
That's fair. I can't argue with that. Thank you very much for joining us again. Please leave your thoughts, leave your comments below. We read them after every conversation. We pull from your comments to decide what we're going to talk about next time, what questions we're going to have. Clearly on this one, you discovered that Jihi does not necessarily want to rescue me. If I am in desperate need, I hope one of you will rescue me if I am in desperate need. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go get an international life insurance policy to make sure that no matter where I get ill,
You can save yourself.
I can at least hire somebody to rescue me. But thank you very much for paying attention. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Take care.